Hello, everyone. It's Juliane Caillouette Noble here, Managing Director of the Sustainable Restaurant Association. And I'm really excited to have an amazing conversation today about food waste in restaurants. This is part of our series of real talk conversations with chefs and restaurateurs and businesses all around the world, talking about the issues that are affecting their restaurant and how they are tackling them. James, thank you so much for being here with me. If you don't mind, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm James. I am from restaurant Wild Shropshire up in Whitchurch, sort of right in the middle of the country. We are a 14-cover tasting menu only restaurant, and alongside our restaurant we have our own little farm and our own little laboratory. It's not a laboratory; it's a little room with toys, but we call it the laboratory, and which is it's all connected and all sort of works out with what we do.
Brilliant. It's a brilliant restaurant that you've got there, and as you say, kind of right up towards the kind of borders between Wales and England, and
Very much so.
yeah, and I'm excited to hear about some of the specifics of the operation and what you guys are doing in your kitchen to hopefully inspire some others in this conversation. So first and foremost, could you talk to us a little bit about why reducing waste is important to you and to the restaurant?
Well, you can look at this from lots of different ways. You know, from a very cynical chef point of view, I can look at it from a financial point of view and say every little bit of waste is money lost. And we're a super ambitious restaurant, you know, and to be super ambitious, you've got to have staff in place, etc., etc. All those things they're paying for. And waste is one of the ways of kind of helping pay for those things. It sounds completely cynical from a broader sense of point of view. You know, without sounding too dramatic, you know, the world is on fire.
Yeah.
And you know, we could talk philosophically about it, but you know, restaurants are entertainment. You know, unless you're one of a Central or a Noma or an Al Bulli or something like that that's doing something really forward thinking, we're entertainment. We're somewhere that people go to have a nice time. So we really need to look at what we're doing and our impact and minimize that. And you know, waste is one of the aspects of that. So I think for us it just felt like, you know, we're a restaurant and just deeply entrenched within nature and our environment. It's our job to look after that. You know, we can't just take without trying to give something back. And that sounds really cliched. And
no,
we kind of, to make the business sustainable long term, not just financially, but in a broader sense, we've got to negate a lot of what we do. It doesn't become sustainable. Eventually, it will die. I know that sounds overly dramatic, but
no, it really, it really does. So let's talk a little bit about the nitty-gritty of your restaurant. How do you guys work to kind of cut waste in your kitchen operations? What does that look like, both back of house and front of house, in terms of how you look to address these issues?
Gary, so when we first started this sort of road down, you know, I always wanted a restaurant with a farm because from years back I wanted great ingredients. Now and then we kind of get talking along the sustainable road, and it's something we really felt it was right for us to do. So we sat down as a team and said, how is our business impacting? What do we need to do to cut waste? And you know, we're a tasting menu. I can tell you exactly how many guests we've got this week. And so I can pick exactly the right amount of, garlic, or we can take the exact amount of meat or scallops or whatever proteins we. So we don't have a huge amount of food waste.
Right.
You know, so we had to look at other sides of the business. Now there is some waste, you know, bones, shells, trim, things like that. And, you know, we make stocks and stuff like that. But having that space on the farm, you know, food waste, organic waste, all goes into our composting system. So in terms of organic waste, there's nothing at all. But we can only do that because we've been privileged enough to be given a piece of land that we can build composting on. And I've got a guy who does that for me.
Yeah.
In terms of front of house and back of house, I mean, we're a very small restaurant, you know, we all work together. All of our packaging is recyclable. It can all go into our composting system because it's all
cardboard and kind of carbon.
Yeah. So we've spoken to the suppliers, said, right, we need to be able to recycle everything, or compost everything, sorry. There is some plastic, which isn't ideal. We've cut out, I don't want to put big numbers on things, probably about 90% of plastic. That all goes into recycling. Now, recycling is not ideal because it's another process. That process takes energy.
Right.
But it's better than where we were. And, we're very conscious of this is the goalposts are continually moving on this.
Well, of course, yeah.
Refine. Where we saw waste, for the most part, is the excess on the farm. So, succession planting is really, really hard. So one day we'll have nothing, the next day we'll have 3,000 radishes, which is not ideal. And I think that's the same with, most farms and growing. So we've got what we call the lab now. So we took a shipping container, we converted it, and we put all sorts of toys in there. And so instead of those things just going into the compost system, which would, give back, it's not ideal. Yeah. We can then ferment and pickle and distill and, go through lots, do lots of things with all our excess vegetables, etc. And that accounts for a lot of our waste. That stuff would usually go to the compost system, but instead it goes into, fermented stuff, which we're using now because we don't have a lot on the ground at the moment. Wild garlic is just starting to come up where we are, which will be great. And then, in the next couple of weeks, everything on the menu is going to taste of, wild garlic. And then the other place we really saw waste was in emissions. And that goes back to us being entertainment. So, I read about, I've written it down somewhere about whether restaurants can be sustainable. And my first question was like, no, because, my first answer was no, because we've got fridges, we've got ovens. Right. My fridge is always on. My oven is on a lot.
Yeah.
Guests are driving, we're in the middle of nowhere, literally in the middle of nowhere. Guests are driving really long ways to come and see us.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we saw waste. So we embarked on a big project to try and offset all emissions. So we look at the emissions that my staff create coming to and from work. Our guests, we have a conversation with our guests, well, our booking manager does, in terms of how they're getting to us, how far they're coming to visit us, etc. And then those of our suppliers as well. And the idea being is that we use some very approximate calculations at the moment, and they are because we have to make approximations for the system to work. Of course. Which again is part of our refinement process. But then we use a tree planting company to plant trees to offset that. And again, that's not ideal, but it's some way down that road. And those are the places we found waste. There's other bit, using whole animals and stuff like that. But lots of restaurants use whole animals. I'm trying to think of what is it we do that maybe is particular to us.
Yeah, and though yes, you're right. Lots of restaurants might be using whole animal butchery, or that this isn't kind of, a forefront kind of new trend. It still isn't the norm in terms of how the industry operates by any means, right? And so these things are still, and also these things take refinement as well, because you need butchery skill. Are you kind of buying in whole carcasses? Are you butchering them yourselves? Are you partnering with butcheries? There's lots of different models in terms of how restaurants can choose to do those things. Interesting.
So coming from my background of sort of having a midlife crisis, becoming a chef, before sustainability took such a massive role within what we're doing, you very quickly sort of get into your rhythms with your meat, and you get the same duck breasts and the same lamb cannons, things like that, and you always use the same bit. And then once we started using whole animals, all of a sudden there's this, oh my God, I've got to use this part of an animal I've never used before. And I've got a real education. I've got to think about things. And, my skill level's gone up. Yeah. Not just because you've gone down this road and we've had to look at things in different ways. And that's a really nice sort of, I don't know.
And I think this is genuinely, as much as the sort of nose to tail conversation has been there in certain corners of the industry, this idea of carcass balance as a way of reducing waste, I think, is something that is incredibly important that we continue to talk about. And whether you are doing it individually within your restaurant, buying a whole carcass and making sure you're utilizing every part, or whether we're pushing the system to balance carcasses better by rethinking how we order, by rethinking the choices of cuts that are going on our menus. I think that's a huge step towards managing waste.
Yeah, I mean, and this gets into a later part I thought about. My butcher is brilliant, and she is very interested in, you say carcass balance, she talks about it all the time, and she's always pushing for, she'll talk to me about other restaurants, bigger restaurants, and they want 100 kilos of ribeye steaks. That's a lot of cows. That's a lot with a lot of waste. And she talks about carcass balance all the time, and we're very lucky in that we've been able to align ourselves with a few people who've got the same ethos and values as us.
Amazing.
And I think when you get into this conversation about sustainability, you really have to do your homework in terms of who you're working with and make sure that they have the same, maybe not complete the same ethos, but they work on the same values as you, because it's all well and good us trying to do something, but you need, it's that whole, a community raises a child type of thing, isn't it? And
totally,
our community looks after our restaurant, because I can't do it. We don't have the fridge space for the whole animal butchery. So Rach, my butcher, has got to be on board as well. And she is, and she's brilliant. She'll push that with us. And
I 100%. And I think this is a perfect kind of segue to talk a little bit more about your supply chain and the work that you're doing with your suppliers, but more kind of broadly, this idea that partnership is incredibly important in our industry. We don't operate in a vacuum. We have suppliers, we have farmers, we have the sort of up and down the value chain. And so it's really, these partnerships and identifying who is a good partner for your business and whose values as a partner align with yours is a really important thing. Secondly, it's okay. I think this idea that in order to be sort of nose to tail in your approach, you need to do whole carcass butchery within your own kitchen. I've definitely had a number of butchers that have come to me and had conversations to say, what we actually want is to encourage restaurants to have better dialogue with their butcher. And, butchers have skills, they have, and they're passionate about these issues. And so having those dialogues, rather than saying, you need to now be able to hang a whole, half a cow in your fridge, isn't the best sort of utilization of resources. And, this whole sustainability as a system thing is a really important kind of realization, I think, for you guys as a small restaurant. You rely on the wider ecosystem and the partnerships around you.
I think, again, this is the sort of later part we've touched on, but I think one of the issues with restaurants becoming sustainable, I mean, we're all super busy, so as the restaurant owner, we have to sort of farm off other things to other members of staff, but you're super busy. There's no infrastructure. It's all very do it yourself and work it out as you go along. And I think that's one of the issues. And we've been very lucky in that we've got some very, very clever people around us that have managed to make this much easier for us and make it an easy, not an easy transition, but I think that's a really good point. And I think with all things, you're right, this industry is low margin and it's incredibly busy, and there's always something urgent, there's something that has broken, there's a fire, there's somebody that's not there, something hasn't turned up, somebody, it is non-stop. Realize on us not thinking of sustainability as this sort of line item at the bottom of a to-do list. It really has to be a lens and a mindset shift on how you approach everything within your operations. One of the things I was sort of going to mention later, I think a lot of people who want to do sustainability almost see it as an add-on, sort of pack and buy, and you can put it onto your website. And you kind of need to sit down and say, right, what do we do? How do we make this work? And you kind of need to rebuild your business all the way up with every tiny little aspect of everything. Sous vide cooking. We don't sous vide cook anymore because we can't recycle the plastic and compostable ones. Dreadful. So we've just little bits and pieces, we've completely had to change how we work. you know, I think it's for the better for the restaurant, and it feels better in terms of what we're producing now. But it's not an easy process of just.
No, it's a mindset shift.
Our sustainability hat now, and
yeah,
you know, this is what we are.
Yeah, it's a mindset shift. And I think, like you say, it's really that taking a step back and saying, what are our values as a restaurant? What's important to us? And how are we going to address those across these issues?
I think as a way forward for other restaurants is that we need to start speaking to farmers. You know, we need to start, you know, if we can't do it ourselves, and I'm very lucky that, you know, I'm in that position that we can do it ourselves, or at least I employ someone to do it for me, because I'm not that guy. I think we need to start having more personal relationships with people.
Yeah.
And that's how we can make it work. You know, we have such little waste because we have personal relationships with people.
Yeah.
We can make it work that way.
Well, and it sounds like
set your boundaries as well. You know, if we take one product, if we take wine, so that bottle of wine has come to me, and we sell it, and we recycle the glass, and that's brilliant. We've dealt with the emissions from the van coming from London to us, and that's great. We've sort of dealt with that side. What we haven't dealt with is the building of the van, the shipping from France to England, whatever is involved in the making of the wine. So I think you've got to set realistic boundaries for yourself and say, we can do this much, and we will do that much, and be honest with yourselves. I think, and which is why I go back to, we can't be zero waste. And I know it's all very sort of broad, but I think you really need to sort of focus on yourself, which is when you go back to having a conversation with your staff. Where and what can we do? How can we negate as much as possible? And
that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit more about your laboratory for a second, because this whole, you know, being a small and seasonal restaurant, and like you say, we're in the middle of what is known as the Hungry Gap in the UK. And so preservation and this whole kind of fermentation, pickling, and all of that, you know, does that excite you? Tell me about kind of how you guys approach that, how you use that on, you know, how you engage with your lab in that way.
So I mean, the lab is brilliant. It is the most exciting thing, and I call it a lab. You know, it's.
You're allowed to call it a lab, but we work in work in the industry. There's loads. This is not the most pretentious naming of a.
It started as a joke, but it's one of those jokes that's just sort of hung around.
Yeah, no, you're not the only one though that runs a lab in that way, so that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, I got into cooking 12, 13 years ago. I became a chef, and the whole new Nordic scene was taken off.
Yeah.
And that was very much based on fermentation and pickling, etc., etc. And I kind of got into that based on these guys, because it was the cool new thing to do.
Yeah.
If I'm completely honest about it, but fell in love with it.
Yeah.
You know, and then that just ties perfectly into everything else we're doing. So, you know, and we have a few core processes. So, I don't know, maybe I'll go pick some wild garlic later if it's ready. We will turn it into oil. We will turn it into a pickle. We will turn it into a salt. Turn it into a ferment. And so we've got all these things ready to go, all our jars ready to go. And it takes 10 minutes to ferment this product, pickle this product, leave it there. And then this time of the year, I mean, our main course, our final savoury course at the moment, we're serving a 5-year-old mutton, which is great because no one serves 5-year-old sheep. And it's just a piece of meat. But with this piece of meat, or the pieces of meat, because we use a couple of different cuts every night, you get a little plate of pickles. So we've got pickled larch rose on there. We've got umeboshi plums from plums stolen from my neighbour's tree. You know, we've got radish seed pods. So, you know, sort of, we've had the radishes, we've used the flowers, the seed pods have come up, we've pickled them. And then we can start talking about these processes, and we can start talking about the lab, and we can start talking about sustainability and how these things are creating flavours when we haven't got any. Yeah. So, I mean, from a sustainability point of view, it's brilliant because we don't waste anything. It all goes in there, you know, whether it's, you know, salted or dehydrated or whatever. You know, there's all these millions of processes you can do. But for the most part, it's there for flavour. You know, it gives us some value at the end of it because we have flavour at this time of the year when, you know, you talk about the Hungry Gap. It's just got sunny here for the last couple of days. So people are going to come into the restaurant expecting, you know, sort of warmer food, you know, sort of summer, not summery food,
Yeah.
you know, going down that line, and they're still not there. You know, there's still, you know,
of
the ground's
course.
still cold. It was still frozen this morning. But these are ways that we can create flavors, which is kind of from a chef point of view, that's what's really important.
Yeah.
But from, you know, sort of more sort of overarching point of view, it just means that there's nothing wasted over there.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I love hearing these kind of really tangible examples of these pickles that you guys are creating, because I think it's an important reminder of the sort of opportunity that all the parts of a vegetable or all the parts of an ingredient provide
yeah,
in that flavor sense. And so, you know, having that creativity, and I think we get really excited when we see that it's not just you know, businesses like yours are kind of innovator businesses, that are at the forefront doing, you know, with tasting menus, and you've got your garden. And it really excites me to think that, you know, inspiring bigger restaurants or casual dining restaurants to start thinking differently about, like, did you know that you could use a seed pod from a radish and, you know,
yeah.
and create flavor in that way.
And, you know, when I talk about, you know, with just entertainment, that's what restaurants like Noma or Central are doing. That, you know, they're taking these really, it's filtering down to us, and it'll filter from us down to smaller, not smaller restaurants, sort of maybe more mainstream restaurants, and then it'll filter down to the,
High
you
street.
know, high street, yeah.
Yeah, in the
And you can
supermarket.
see it filtering down, and that's.
Oh, yeah. You were saying that maybe it makes them think differently about other restaurants, or, you know, ask questions of other restaurants. If you were to give advice to other restaurants looking to minimize food waste in their operation, and maybe a restaurant that isn't a 12-seat tasting menu, what you know, what advice would you have to share?
I mean, I probably already said it a couple of times, but I think you need to sit down as a whole team, whether that be, you know, the owner who's paying the bills, the kitchen porter who's washing dishes, and everyone in between, and you need to discuss every single little process in your kitchen. You then need to decide, right, what can we change now? What can we
Yeah.
change in the future? You know, what is immediate and what is more long term? You know, we've got our long term goals. Our building is dreadful. Eventually, we're going to build a beautiful building that is completely sustainable, solar powered, water capture, all that, you know. But at the moment, that's not viable because we can't get planning. But I think you need to sit down as a team. You need to look at all your processes. You need to assign somebody that is, they're the head of it. They are the focal point for everything. So I've got Amelia, who's done all the work on this.
Yeah.
She's been our focal point. So while I've got other things to think about, like paying VAT bills and
Yeah.
paying staff
National
and
insurance.
national insurance and making sure the restaurant's full, there's somebody else whose focus is this.
Yeah.
And I think you need to look at every aspect of your business. You've got to, it can't just be something that you tack on. You know, we talk about greenwashing, all that kind of stuff. It can't just be, really, we've gone paperless. That's great,
Yeah.
but there's all of this other stuff you've got to do.
Yeah.
And maybe not a timeline, but a plan. You know, how are we getting from A to B to C to D, and, you know, and yeah, have it goal orientated, I guess. So
I love that. I love that, you know, just to kind of pick up on some of those themes of what you're saying. I love the idea of, you know, constant of a kind of dialogue with your team from, you know, KP up through front of house, to think about understanding each of these steps in your operations that might be, you know, producing waste, or that might you know, be inefficient, and kind of naming them, recognizing that you can't tackle everything always at once, and you're going to have to set kind of realistic priorities of what's viable for your business. And then delegating responsibility. I think that's a huge important thing to name in restaurants. And sometimes owners or chefs want to hold things quite close to their chest. And it's important that we delegate those responsibilities so that everybody feels empowered to be a part of these conversations.
Yeah, I think, you know, I mean, first and foremost, I'm a chef, and I cook in the restaurant, and if I'm not there, the restaurant's not open.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can look at all these bigger picture things, but I have to make really tasty food or no one's coming.
Yeah.
You know, we'd be the most sustainable restaurant in the world, but if it's not tasty, no one's going to come.
Yeah.
So for me, having somebody who can pick up all the slack on that stuff and can be working on all these things in the background, just makes everything so much easier, and it means it carries on going. There's always that momentum. I get very excited about things, and then I stop. I need someone. I move on to the next thing that excites me, and I'm going to get really excited about something.
Yeah.
And then this person to go, okay, brilliant. I'm going to do the nuts and bolts. I'm going to, dot all the I's and cross all the T's, etc. Because I'm a dreamer. I'm that guy. I'm going to say, yeah, brilliant. I need engineers, essentially. Do you know what I mean?
And consistency, we need both the inspiration and the excitement, and then we need the consistency and the thoroughness of processes, and and different people have different roles to play in that. So I think that is an important part of restaurants, right? You need the dreamers, you need the ideas people, and then you need the processes and the consistency to follow it up and to make sure that that it's embedded. So thank you so much, James. This has been really a great conversation. I've really enjoyed chatting to you, and thank you for sharing with everyone the work that you guys are doing at the restaurant. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right, we'll speak soon.
Bye.
All right, bye.